Hello, my name is Patrick and I'm making this video for all those out there who currently have the condition known as POTS syndrome, um, a condition which I myself had earlier this year but which I have recovered from. And I wish to make this video to give you hope that there is a way to recover and that the condition is not as mysterious as it is often made out to be. In making this video, I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to talk a bit about my own background with the condition, and then talk about how I got better. So first of all, I want to tell you about a little bit about my own story. Now I'm going to avoid trying to go into the weepies on all this and get to the good stuff, but just to go over it. I think that it started after a car accident in 2011. Now, it didn't start immediately, but I think that accident was a catalyst. And as you know, POTS syndrome is usually triggered by some kind of traumatic event, whether that be an accident or a bereavement or whatever. Now, 50% of people who get it have it following a viral illness, and if that's you, I want you to consider the possibility that your body perceived that illness to be traumatic because it was a hell of an illness, let's say. The symptoms didn't come on immediately, but they came on bit by bit after the car accident. First of all, I noticed that I couldn't put on weight anymore. I used to always be a healthy weight, but I couldn't. I started having problems with different foods. I would start to get exhausted very easily. Brain fog. I started to find that my legs would become heavy, oddly heavy for no particular reason. My body would hurt a lot more than it ever had before, and I wasn't sure why. I started to have very little tolerance to taking exercise. I got weaker and weaker. I'm talking about over years here. 2014, when things started to get worse and worse, and I started to find that I'd be dizzy walking around, and then I started having bizarre reactions to certain foods, really bizarre and scary, for foods and alcohol. I would have a glass of beer, and I would literally, my body would feel like it was shutting down. I would get overheated everywhere, and nothing seemed to work. It was bizarre, horrible feeling. I now think that might have been a sort of initial kind of mast cell activation attack, which those of you who are well read in the POTS syndrome literature will know often overlaps with the condition. So I think my body had started to pick up on certain substances as absolutely dangerous and was sending out this allergic response, shutting down my whole body in the process. I went to the doctor, of course, and no joy there. At this point, we're now, by the way, in about October 2014, I hadn't heard of POTS syndrome, and neither had the doctor, evidently. So things went on. I kept on struggling, and started to feel more and more faint. And then, bang, in February of this year, 2015, where things were bad before, they suddenly became appalling. Suddenly catapulted straight towards becoming completely disabled. And the catalyst in this case was the traumatic awareness that my mum was about to pass away. And it's well known that the POTS syndrome can be triggered by bereavement. In my case, this was the final straw. It was always on the cards that she was going to pass away, but it was the suddenness, the unexpectedness of it. She had cancer for 6 years, but it was the suddenness, the traumatic circumstances in which it happened, all very quick, sudden, and full of one horrible thing after another, that really catapulted me in a way that I couldn't control. You know, this was the scary thing, because I know all the tricks. Like I've always practiced the old mindfulness meditation. I'm well versed with things like CBT and so on, but there was nothing I could do to stop the almost unconscious reaction to what was happening. From February to May of this year, things were incredibly scary, because I was living in a body that did not feel like a body anymore. It felt like something that was just dying. My legs felt like complete and utter cement. I couldn't walk more than 5 minutes without being in danger of fainting. I was incredibly weak. I was in bed 6 hours a day. The reactions to foods became much worse. I would have, almost after any given meal, I would have terrible reactions, and it would just wipe me out for hours. You know, a good day would involve being able to empty the dishwasher. That's what it was like. And still, all this time, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I went to the doctor, a very nice man, who told me that it might be motor neuron disease, and I didn't know. So I did some research, that thing you're not meant to do, and came across POTS syndrome, and took my own pulse, and lo and behold, it was in the 130s or something when I stood up, and it was always increasing over 30, between 30 and 40 beats from supine to stand. So that's where I was in April of this year, feeling awful, only 25, feeling like my life was completely over, and that I wasn't going to have a life. It was going to be a question of eking out enjoyment where you could, or maybe getting so much worse that I'd be barely cognizant. I mean, that's what can happen with this. So it was very scary. Now I'm going to move on to how I recovered. Now then, recovery. Okay. When you are diagnosed with this condition, if you're lucky enough to be so, the first thing you notice is that recovery stories are slight when you look around, hopefully, on the internet. At the same time, there is no consistent consensus or any kind of credible theory out there as to what actually causes the condition as yet. But there must be a cause. Like, come on, there must be a cause. I was determined to get better, or as well as I could be. So I developed a threefold strategy. Number one was medication, beta blockers, blah, blah, blah. Number two, good diet. I was very influenced by the Walls Protocol diet, which is a diet which involves 3 plates of vegetables every day and 2 plates and 3 high quality sources of protein, not 2 plates of protein, which has been shown to reverse the negative effects of MS. So I thought it must help. And the third part of that I thought would help would be the Levine exercise protocol, because that seems to have had some good results. But I also ordered something else, which I thought would be unlikely to help. And that's a program called the Dynamic Neural Retraining System. It is an intensive 6-month brain retraining program, which is based on the science of neuroplasticity, how you can act back through specific exercises on your brain to change it. And neuroplasticity has been used, for example, with stroke patients to recover lost movement, and in various psychological therapies as well. Its main idea is that there's the part of the brain called the limbic system, which controls the flight or fight response, can, if you're unlucky, if some really bad things happen to you, if traumatic events happen to you, can become stuck in chronic flight or fight mode. Your brain literally gets stuck there, And the limbic system is immensely primitive. You know, it's the part of the brain that we share with a tiger or a cat or a mole, a badger, whatever. The person who designed the program did not in fact have POTS syndrome, nor was she aware, I believe, when she designed it, that it could help with POTS syndrome. She had a condition called multiple chemical sensitivity, which is a heightened crisis response from the brain towards everyday chemicals and fragrances that can be life-threatening. Basically, the brain starts to pick up on chemicals as being poisonous following an initial poisoning, an actual poisoning. But what was found later by Annie and those who did the program was that some people with POTS syndrome were going to her and they actually had chemical sensitivity as well. So they went along to rewire their brains for the chemical sensitivity. But lo and behold, they also got better from the POTS. So why might that be? Interesting question. Perhaps they're both caused by the same thing. I found a couple of websites, one in particular, called Wheelchair to Rollerblades, and that had the story of someone called Lauren Dinkle, who was completely disabled with POTS syndrome, and in fact, I believe could not even stand up for a whole 18 months. And on her website, she tells the story of how she recovered and using this brain retraining program. So I thought, well, if it can help her now, maybe I have a chance. But nevertheless, I was skeptical. And because when you're stuck with POTS syndrome, as you will know if you have it, it seems impossible to get better. It seems like anyone who suggests it is messing with you. I thought the exercise protocol will be the most important thing, the diet the second most important thing, the medication helpful, and maybe this brain retraining stuff would help a bit. Well, I was completely wrong about that. It was, in fact, almost entirely the other way around. The brain retraining program is what did it. It is what has cured me of the condition. Today is day 180 since I started the program back on May the 11th. And I am completely cured of the condition. Worked despite my skepticism. I'll never forget it was about a week after I'd started doing the program properly, so it was about mid-May, and I was going out for my usual 5-minute walk, you know, and all of a sudden my legs didn't feel like cement anymore, and they felt lighter. Not as light as they could be, but they felt light. And I remember walking out, and I saw there's this little hill near where we live, and it's only 3 or 4 minutes to the top, but I said to myself, Jesus, I can do that. And I went up and did it. And it was absolutely amazing. I couldn't believe it. That didn't happen every day at the start now. It was up and down. It's been 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. But that I knew I was onto something at that point. And after about 3 weeks of starting the program, there's a much bigger hill nearby, which is a good 45-minute walk if you want to go from the house, if you want to go up it and come back. And I just knew when I got up that morning that I could do that. I could, okay, tears coming, no, stop. And I climbed up that hill, and there was no one else around to share my joy in the moment, but there were some sheep, so I told them about it. Absolutely fantastic moment. Within 3 weeks, I was climbing a massive hill. Now again, I couldn't do it every day at that point, but I did it that day, and it was wonderful. After just under 2 months of taking the program, I took a flight. And you'll know if you have POTS syndrome how much of a big no-no taking a flight is. Now, it wasn't an easy experience. I wasn't ready for it, but I did it. The suspected mast cell activation stuff went away within a couple of weeks of starting it. My energy levels returned to pretty much, 80% after about 3 months of doing the program. For 4 months, I went on a trip on my own and stayed somewhere on my own for 10 days. Again, wasn't feeling 100%, but I could do it with great joy, actually. After 4 months as well, I moved out of my own flat, going up and down stairs, up and down, carrying boxes and everything, after 4 months. Currently, at the moment, I go for a 45-minute walk 6 times a week, including up and down hills. I do strength training exercises 4 times a week. There's still quite a long way to go on the reconditioning, but we're on our way. I have energy pretty much consistent throughout the whole day. I never have to take a lie down except in very special circumstances. I'm just about to go on a massive trip for 10 days, seeing all friends and family. And it's literally got the intensity of a presidential campaign. I'm seeing everyone, and it's going to be wonderful. That's going to involve several flights and all kinds of things, so I'm really looking forward to that. And I want to now, you like hard evidence, right? Hard data, okay. Now, just the other day, yesterday, I think I took my readings. My supine heart rate was 70, and my standing heart rate after 5 minutes was 83, and after 10 minutes was also 83. And now that is completely normal. If you are increasing between 10 and 20 beats from supine to standing, that is normal. Although I'd say I'm 100% cured of the condition, I'm not fully back to myself yet, but I wouldn't expect to be yet. And I've forgotten what it's like to be myself for quite some years, so I'm looking forward to finding out. Why might the limbic system in crisis, the brain in crisis following a trauma, broadly understood, be the cause of POTS syndrome? Well, POTS syndrome is also known as dysautonomia. Now, dysautonomia means that the autonomic nervous system is in crisis, is not working. That's literally what's going on, and we can all, those of us who have or have had the condition, can relate to that. Now, does the autonomic nervous system go crazy because it wants to, of its own accord, because it's just decided to do that one day? No. The autonomic nervous system starts in the limbic system. It starts in the brain. It doesn't act of its own accord. It is constantly receiving a signal from the limbic system via what is known as the HPA axis. The hypothalamus, which is a part of the limbic system, sends a signal at all times to the pituitary gland, which controls many aspects of the body, and to the adrenal glands, which controls the release of adrenaline. So if the signal being sent down is one of crisis, the autonomic nervous system will correspondingly go into crisis. So you need to change the signal. You've got to get the signal back to being normal. And that's what the dynamic neural retraining system does. And that's why it cures dysautonomia. And the second thing is, when the limbic system is in crisis, that HPA axis is not just sending all the branches of the autonomic nervous system, which control everything, by the way, from energy production to the thyroid to hormonal stuff, endocrine stuff, digestion, everything. Not only is that going into crisis, but the adrenal glands are releasing adrenaline all the time. Now, this may be a familiar sensation to you. It certainly was to me. Every 7 seconds, in fact, it was back in March. Now, if there's one thing they found in nearly every single person with POTS, it's that they're hyperadrenergic, which means they have a lot of adrenaline in their blood stream. Now, why? Well, they've found that ability to recycle adrenaline at the site of blood vessel constriction is impaired. Now, why would it be impaired? Save for the fact that there's a whole ton of adrenaline constantly coming, and overwhelming the blood vessels, making them not work properly, making them no longer be able to be constricted properly, and therefore staying wider than they should when you stand up, meaning that the heart has to beat faster to compensate for the extra blood volume, meaning that adrenaline is spilling out into the bloodstream and going onto the heart and causing it to beat faster still. This can only be explained by a brain in crisis. Is the only possible explanation. The constant adrenaline release is not released because the adrenal glands decide to release it. It's released because the brain decides to release it. In saying this, it is not a psychological condition. The limbic system is an immensely primitive part of the brain. It's not your fault if it goes into crisis. In my case, it wasn't my fault that I was in a terrible car accident. And the effect of that on me, there was nothing I could do about it, unless I knew how the right exercises. Likewise with the bereavement. I had no control over what happened. Some people get it after a physical assault. You can't help it that your brain responded in a certain way to that. Or after a terrible illness, like mononucleosis or Lyme disease. The actual virus has left you, but it was such a terrible illness and so traumatic on the body that the brain remains in a traumatic state, which just goes to show that the whole psychological understanding of the brain as just a psychological thing is absolute rubbish. I mean, it can be affected by very physical illnesses. Or some people after a very difficult pregnancy get POTS syndrome. And it's not your fault. But with the right exercises, which this program provides, you can rewire your brain back to normal. And the adrenaline stops, the hyperadrenergic state stops, your blood vessels heal up, and your heart rate returns to normal. That's why I think the brain is the cause of this condition. It's a very physical illness, because the brain, if you haven't guessed it, unless you're adherents of Plato, is a very, very physical organ. No one would suggest that MS or Parkinson's are psychological illnesses. The fact that POTS syndrome is, I believe, caused by the brain shouldn't mean that it's thought of as psychological. It's not. It is something that happens after a terrible event, and there was no way you could have any control over that. And or series of events. And challenging the idea, therefore, that there's no cure. The cure is a self-directed neuroplasticity program, which you can do, and you can order it right now, and you can be feeling better very soon, no matter how long you've had this. Because although I didn't have it very long, I'm very lucky that I ordered this program that I thought wouldn't work. I'm very lucky I ordered it. But it doesn't matter how long you've had it. There are people, when you get this program, you get access to a forum with people who are doing it with you. And there are people on that who had POTS syndrome for 25 years and who are now better. There are people who were wheelchair bound for years and who are now better. Final word, I just want to say a huge thank you to a few people. The first is Annie Hopper. I wish to say thank you to you for creating this program, which has helped thousands and thousands and thousands of people to get better from a whole host of brain-related conditions. Your courage always has inspired me, and I'm so grateful to you. And I also want to say a huge thank you to Lauren Dinkle, because if you hadn't created that website, Wheelchair to Rollerblades, I wouldn't have ordered the program. And your story has for me been a constant source of inspiration, and I am hugely grateful to you for trying the brain rewiring and possibly being the first person with POTS syndrome to have recovered from it by doing so, and therefore showing the world that this probably is in fact a brain-related condition.